Chapter 2: A Secret World is Born. On November 29, 1947, the United Nations General Assembly voted to divide Palestine, carving out a sovereign Jewish homeland. The partition wouldn't go into effect until 6 months later, but Arab attacks began the very next day. Hassan Salemi, the commander of the Palestinian forces in the southern part of the country, and his fighters ambushed two Israeli buses near the town of Petah Tikva, murdering 8 passengers and injuring many others. Civil war between Palestinian Arabs and Jews had begun. The day after the bus attacks, Salemi stood in the central square of the Arab port city of Jaffa. Palestine will turn into a bloodbath, he promised his countrymen. He kept that promise. During the next 2 weeks, 48 Jews were killed and 155 wounded. Salemi, who led a force of 500 guerrillas and even directly attacked Tel Aviv, became a hero in the Arab world, lionized in the press. The Egyptian magazine Al-Musawwar published an enormous photograph of Salemi, briefing his forces in its January 12, 1948 issue. Why there's a comma there? Come on. Under the banner headline, "The Hero Hassan Salemi, Commander of the Southern Front." Ben-Gurion had prepared... The commas are a lot like listening to Christopher Walken speak. Ben-Gurion had prepared for such assaults. To his thinking, Palestine's Arabs were the enemy, and the British, who would continue to rule until the partition took formal effect in May 1948, were their abettors. The Jews could depend only on themselves and their rudimentary forces. Most of the Haganah troops were poorly trained and poorly equipped, their arms hidden in secret caches to avoid confiscation by the British. They were men and women who had served in the British Army, bolstered by new immigrants who had survived the Holocaust, some of them Red Army veterans, but they were vastly outnumbered by the combined forces of the Arab states. Ben-Gurion was aware of the estimations of the CIA and other intelligence services that the Jews would collapse under Arab attack. Some of his own people weren't confident of victory, but Ben-Gurion, at least outwardly, displayed confidence in the Haganah's ability to win. To bridge the numerical gap, the Haganah's plan, then, was to use selective force, picking targets for maximum effectiveness. As part of this conception, a month into the Civil War, its High Command launched Operation Starling, which named 23 leaders of the Palestinian Arabs who were to be targeted. The mission, according to Haganah's Commander-in-Chief, Yaakov Dori, was threefold: elimination or capture of the leaders of the Arab political parties, strikes against political centers, strikes against Arab economic and manufacturing centers. Why didn't they use an and? Hassan Salemi was at the top of the list of targets, under the leadership of Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem and the spiritual leader of the Palestinian Arabs. Salemi had helped lead the Arab Revolt of 1936, in which Arab guerrillas for 3 years attacked both British and Jewish targets. Damn, the Brits just had no friends. Both al-Husseini and Salemi fled Palestine after they were put on the British Mandate's most wanted list. In 1942, they joined forces with the SS in Abwehr, spelled A-B-W-E-H-R, the Nazis' military intelligence agency, to plot Operation Atlas. It was a grandiose plan in which German and Arab commandos would parachute into Palestine and position Tel Aviv's water supply in order to kill as many Jews as possible, rousing the country's Arabs to fight a holy war against the British occupiers. It failed miserably when the British, having cracked the Nazis' Enigma code, captured Salemi and 4 others after they dropped into a desert ravine near Jericho on October 6, 1944. After World War II, the British released al-Husseini and Salemi. The Jewish Agency's political department, which oversaw much of the Yishuv's covert activity in Europe, tried to locate the former and kill him several times between 1945 and 1948. The motive was partly revenge for the Mufti's alliance with Hitler, but it was also defensive. Al-Husseini might have been out of the country, but he was still actively involved in organizing attacks on Jewish settlements in northern Palestine, and in attempts to assassinate Jewish leaders. Due to a lack of intelligence and trained operational personnel, all those attempts failed. The hunt for Salameh, the first Haganah operation to integrate human and electronic intelligence, began promisingly. A unit belonging to Shai, spelled S-H-A-I, the Haganah's intelligence branch, and commanded by Isser Harel, tapped into the central telephone trunk line that connected Jaffa with the rest of the country. Harel had a tool shed built on the grounds of nearby Mikveh Israel Agricultural School, and filled it with pruning shears and lawn mowers. But hidden in a pit under the floor was a listening device clipped to copper wires of the Jaffa's phone system. I'll never forget the face of the Arabic-speaking Shai operative who put on a set of headphones and listened to the first conversation. Harel later wrote in his memoir, "His mouth gaped in astonishment, and he waved his hand emotionally to silence the others who were tensely waiting. The lines were bursting with conversations the political leaders and the chiefs of armed contingents were conducting with their colleagues." One of the speakers was Salameh. In one of the intercepted calls, Shai learned that he would be traveling to Jaffa. So, in one of the intercepted calls, the intelligence agency learned he would be traveling to Jaffa, he being Salameh. Haganah agents planned to ambush him by felling a tree to block the road in which his car would be traveling. But the ambush failed, and it was not the last failure. Salameh survived multiple assassination attempts before falling in combat in June 1948, his killer unaware of his identity. Almost all the other Operation Starling targeted killing bids also failed because of faulty intelligence or flawed performances by the unskilled and inexperienced hitmen. The only operations that did succeed were all carried out by two of Haganah's elite units, both of which belonged to Palmach, the militia's only well-trained and fairly well-armed corps. One of these units was Paliem, the Marine Company, and the other was the Arab Platoon, a clandestine commando unit whose members operated disguised as Arabs. Paliem, the Naval Company, was ordered to take over the port of Haifa, Palestine's most important maritime gateway, as soon as the British departed. Its task was to steal as much of the weaponry and equipment the British were beginning to ship out as possible, and to prevent the Arabs from doing likewise. We focused on the Arab arms acquirers, that's what's going on. We focused on the Arab arms acquirers in Haifa and the north. We searched for them and killed them, recalled Avraham Dar, one of the Paliem men. Dar, who was a native English speaker, and two other Paliem men posed as British soldiers wanting to sell stolen gear to the Palestinians for a large amount of cash. A rendezvous was set up for the exchange near an abandoned flour mill on the outskirts of an Arab village. The three Jews wearing British uniforms were at the meeting place when the Palestinians arrived. Four others, who were hiding nearby, waited for the signal and then fell upon the Arabs, killing them with metal pipes. We feared that gunshots would wake the neighbors, and we decided on a silent operation, said Dar. The Arab platoon was established when the Haganah decided it needed a nucleus of trained fighters who could operate deep inside enemy lines, gathering information and carrying out sabotage and targeted killing missions. The training of its men, most of them immigrants from Arab lands, included commando tactics and explosives, but also intensive study of Islam and Arab customs. They were nicknamed Mistaravim. The name by which Jewish communities went in some Arab countries where they practiced Jewish religion but were similar to the Arabs in all other respects: dress, language, social customs, etc. Cooperation between the two units produced an attempt on the life of Sheikh Nimr I don't know how to pronounce that, Nimr, Sheikh Nimr al-Khatib, a head of the Islamic Organizations of Palestine, one of the original targets of Operation Sterling because of his considerable influence over the Palestinian street. The Mitzvarim, could move around without being stopped by either the British or the Arabs. In February 1948, they ambushed al-Khatib when he returned from a trip to Damascus with a carload of ammunition. He was badly wounded, left Palestine, and removed himself from any active political roles. A few days later, Avram Dar heard from one of his port worker informants that a group of Arabs in a cafe had been talking about their plan to detonate a vehicle packed with explosives in a crowded Jewish section of Haifa. The British ambulance that they had acquired for this purpose was being readied in a garage in Nazareth Road, in the Arab part of the city. The Mitzvarim prepared a bomb of their own in a truck that they drove into the Arab district, posing as workers engaged in fixing a burst pipe. I forgot to turn that fan off. A few days later, Avram Dar heard from one of his port worker informants that a group of Arabs in a cafe had been talking about their plan to detonate a vehicle packed with explosives in a crowded Jewish section of Haifa. The British ambulance that they had acquired for this purpose was being readied in a garage in Nazareth Road, in the Arab part of the city. The Mitzvarim prepared a bomb of their own in a truck that they drove into the Arab district, posing as workers engaged in fixing a burst pipe, and parked next to the wall of the garage. "What are you doing here? No parking here. Move the truck," the men in the garage yelled at them in Arabic. "Right away, we're just getting a drink and we needed to take a leak," the Mitzvarim replied in Arabic, adding a few Drusi curses. They walked away to a waiting car, and a few minutes later their bomb went off, detonating the one in the ambulance as well, and killing 5 Palestinians working on it.